Welcome to the Create Harmony podcast with Sally Burlington. This is a podcast about setting an intentional rhythm, about savoring life's blessings and learning how to use our imagination as a way of listening to God. If you want to learn more about how to bring stillness and gratitude into your life, you'll probably find a lot here that you love. And if you like to be creative and fun, there is a place for you here as well. In this place, we'll take a few minutes to celebrate everyday joys and remind ourselves how to notice goodness all around us. Welcome back to episode 34 of the Create Harmony podcast. We are so glad that you joined us today. So last week, we took a break from our discussion of joy in order to focus just briefly on the idea of grace. So now we're back to refocusing ourselves on joy, and we're going to finish up our discussion. But before we start on that, I'll give you a refresher. I'll summarize where we stand. Way back at the beginning of this discussion, we noted the difference between happiness and joy. And you remember that we learned that happiness is tied to circumstances, while joy is a deeper, more enduring emotion. And in order to experience joy, it seems that we need habits in our lives that revolve around certain themes. So we've been going through these themes, and these themes are gratitude and an awareness that there is something greater than you, stillness and calm, regular periods of rest, a sense of wonder about the world around you, and a sense of playfulness, a time of play. So in our past episodes, we've zoomed the lens in for gratitude. We've talked about stillness and calm, and we've focused in on a sense of wonder. So we've gone through those three things. So what we have left to examine is rest and play. And we left these two till the end because they are probably the most easily misunderstood and maybe the hardest to capture in our adult lives. These are things that I think are simple, but they are not easy. So we hear the term rest and we think sleep, and we hear the term play and we think, yep, that's what little kids do. Moving on. But finding regular habits of rest and play, to me, it's just not as straightforward as that. Or it's not as straightforward as that in my life. So this week, we're going to tackle rest. We're going to take it on. And for me, one of the big challenges about rest is figuring out exactly what will be the most restful. Now, what do I mean by that? So I think we should back up just a bit. If I asked you to make a list of ways that you rest or how to rest, you could probably come up with a decent list. You'd start listing off things like going on vacation, watching shows on Netflix, sleeping or taking a nap. You'd list things along those lines. But I think rest is maybe a little more complex than that. So let me explain. When I feel the most burnt out and tired, I try to identify what would make me feel relaxed and restored. And the thing is, the answer is not always consistent. Sometimes I come up with things that I think will be restful on the front end, and I schedule those. But then once I've done them, they don't really always fulfill me like I'd hoped. A few years ago, I read a book by Rebecca Lyons, and this book was called Rhythms of Renewal. She did a great job of discussing how we become more renewed. And she divided these ways into 4 categories. So her categories were rest, restore, connect, and create. And I liked that. Those were easily understandable 4 categories. So she explained how we need things in all these areas in order to completely renew and refresh ourselves. And then she divided those 4 categories into 2 parts. The rest and restore categories were described as input rhythms. So those are ones where we put resources back in. And the other 2, connect and create, were output rhythms. So her examples of rest were related to taking a break from technology and like practicing Sabbath. She talked about sleep. She talked about taking time to get quiet and taking time for reflection. So then in her category of restore, she included examples like finding time to play, eating healthy, getting regular exercise, looking for adventure in life. And in my own experience and what I observe from my friends, I think that we might be better at restoring than actually resting. We like restoring. We're comfortable with eating healthy. We're comfortable with exercise. We like adventure. We can do those things better than we practice Sabbath or take time to get quiet and reflect. And maybe at times we practice restoring behaviors and we call them rest. And maybe for some of us at some times, they are actually restful. But sometimes the type of rest I need is deeper than just taking a long walk outside. Sometimes I need rest that involves a quiet and deep connection between myself and God. I need to shut out the voices from my life, from my family and my friends, right down to Netflix, podcast, sometimes even music. I need to make all of that noise go away, just for a short period of time, to recenter myself on God, to open myself to the peace that is always available. And what that looks like for me is setting aside time in my calendar for Sabbath, making quiet and stillness a priority, maybe going on retreat. And with the many things that we're all juggling, that is challenging. And if that thought seems overwhelming to you, I encourage you to start small. What is a baby step you could take in that direction? Could you set aside a short break for yourself each week? Or begin one new habit that is more in the category of rest than it is in restore? Now, this might require some time of reflection and journaling on what you think might work for you, and it might require some trial and error. Maybe you try something and everything does not go exactly as planned. As I said earlier, that's been my experience plenty of times. I make a plan, I'm going to rest and restore, and then after I'm done, I find that that combination of activities did not quite access the need that I had. Or I make a plan, and when the day comes, something interrupts that plan. And while that's frustrating, it's just like anything else. I just need to begin again. And this is where grace comes in. And we can learn as we go. If you need more inspiration on this topic, you can grab a copy of Rhythms of Renewal by Rebecca Lyons. She also has a planner and a journal that you can use to make these concepts more practical, that you can use in writing things down and, creating more solid habits for yourself. It's very, very helpful. So for our closing today, we're going to do something a little bit different than we normally do. I'm going to offer you some questions for reflection. And these questions come directly out of Rebecca's book. I took them from her book. So I'm going to ask the question, and then I'm going to give a little bit of a pause for you to think, and then I'll go to the next one. The first question is, how long has it been since you took an inventory of your life? And what would it look like if you did? How might you create a sense of calm before climbing into bed? What could you add or subtract from your bedtime routine? If you believed you could start each morning in the comfort of God, how would you prioritize your time to make that a reality? May it be so. Thanks again for joining us as we lean in to rest and all the ways that it can bless us. Hope you'll come back next week for our final topic related to joy, which is play. I bet you'll love to hear more about that one. You don't want to miss it. And until next time, peace.